This is Dragus, a fictional map intended to feel like somewhere along the border of France and Germany around the year 1870. Two teams are about to fight a battle here, red and blue. Red team starts here and is trying to get to the other corner of the map, here, which is defended by blue. Their objective is to take one of two highways, the North Road, which is the northern one, or the King's Road, which is the southern one. The reason is that both of these roads join back up further off the map to the west. The simple version of the lore behind this scenario is that blue is making a fighting retreat southwest. They've left a rear guard as a sacrificial lamb to delay red's pursuit. So red's vanguard is fighting blue's rearguard in a bid for time. These are the team compositions. Although it might not look like much, this is about 30,000 men represented by blocks. Blue has about 12,000 and red has about 18,000. Blue has a regulation-sized division, which is historically accurate to what a rearguard of a full army might look like during this period. On the other side, red has about 1.5 divisions. He has an extra brigade and an extra artillery battery, mainly because I played this scenario twice before and the feedback was that the scenario was extremely lopsided in favor of blue, so I felt the need to give red a bit of a numerical advantage. These are the starting positions of both teams. I've demarcated their approximate deployment zone. They were allowed to deploy outside of these zones, but I advised against doing so. I didn't just mark random positions on the map for their deployment, I actually thought about what would make sense for where you would deploy. The reason that I recommended that they do not deploy outside of these zones will become clear quite soon, and does actually play out during this game. I don't make videos on every game of Kriegsspiel that I run, only the interesting ones. And this was one of many of the interesting things that happened in this game, which sort of explains why I'm making this video. Anyways, in terms of planning, blue thinks that he only needs to defend the King's Road because I messed up his briefing and I didn't tell him that he needed to protect the North Road as well. Oops. This was another reason that I wanted to make this video. My other videos set a very high bar for other umpires, and a lot of newer umpires who are thinking about maybe trying their hand at umpiring get very intimidated out of trying their hand at being a referee because of these videos. So I thought I would demonstrate a game where I make a massive mistake, because it's a lot more honest, especially when you're a newer umpire. This whole game was actually just a playtest for some streamlining of my rules, so this kind of mistake where I messed up the objectives in the briefing wasn't too big of a deal because I was more focused on getting these guys to kill each other. In any case, blue thinks that he only needs to protect the King's Road, so the obvious defensive strategy is to block or destroy all the bridges. Blue naturally decides to send his whole army along the King's Road with that objective. Meanwhile, red has the strategy of rushing for Stolze. Despite my massive mistake, it's starting to look like nobody will even notice, or so I hope. But the problem with my hopes, and with blue's plan, is that blue decides to deploy outside of their deployment zone along the highway, and now we get to see the consequences. Overnight, blue is camped around the Dragus area, and so for blue to deploy along the highway, his men have to physically walk to get there. This isn't like Total War where your units just apparate into position. We're actually trying to simulate reality here, so the men are going to be walking into where you tell them to deploy. And that takes time and kicks up dust on and around the road. Apart from his deployment on the hill, blue sends a few cavalry northward on the other route just in case red goes there, but is otherwise completely dedicated to the King's Road approach. The problem with this forward deployment is that both sides were given sentries to make sure that the enemy doesn't try to ambush them in the night. Blues were here, and reds were here. The pair of sentries on Hill 70 are the important ones because they have a line of sight on the forward edge of blue's deployment, and behind it they can see a lot of dust clouds coming from the King's Road. All of these warning signs then get conveyed to Red HQ, who is in the middle of deploying for Stolze. He sort of figures out that blue must be making a big deployment along the King's Road. And furthermore, since his sentries saw this movement early in the morning, he thinks that blue must be anxious to get to the bridges first. Red deduces that blue's strategy will be to cut red off from the bridges, which foils his plans to take Stolze. He falls into somewhat of a panic. But after looking at his briefing again and some reminders from his junior officers, Red decides that he'll redeploy to rush down the North Road at full strength. So at 9:15, Red's units are spotted debouching from the woods by Blue's sentries, but it will take time for the information to get to Blue's HQ, which is all the way across the river and up the hill. Although it might look like Red and Blue should be able to see each other here, there are actually trees in the way, which do not give either side a clear enough picture for me to give them that information. 3 minutes later, and Blue's courier has only moved this much. Blue's HQ is really far away from his sentries on Hill 72. This is another reason that I wanted to make a video about this game, because it shows off some of the strengths of playing the game according to the old rules. Most umpires these days would not include sentries in their game, and it's a really fast way to add incredible depth to your games, so I would recommend it. Elsewhere, Blue Cavalry turns the corner in the woods and can now see Red Cavalry coming towards them. Blue is outnumbered and in a narrow defile, which is a terrible situation for cavalry. They decide to book it and send a runner to warn Blue HQ, but again, Blue is just way too far to receive this message in a timely manner. He's almost 3 miles away. By 9:18, Blue has effectively taken 2 out of 3 of the bridges, but now that Red has adapted his plans, this will be meaningless. By 9:30, Blue takes the 3rd bridge, and has engineers rig the other 2 to explode. If you look closely, Blue is only just getting news about what happened to his northwest. 15 minutes later, Blue suspects that Red is coming towards him on one of these 2 paths. Meanwhile, his army is stuck at this bridge in sort of a traffic jam, and Red Cavalry learn that the path to their objective is clear, with the main body not far behind. At this critical point in time, Blue is finally informed of the importance of the North Road, and my massive mistake as the guy who wrote this briefing without the information that the North Road is important. Oops. So with that in mind, Blue pivots hard and realizes that he needs to center his defense around Hill 72, ordering his men forward. By 9:40, Red's cavalry reaches the west and is ordered to set up a defensive line against a potential Blue counterattack. This pinning maneuver will become important for the game, and was really smart. Meanwhile, Blue gets up on Hill 72 and finally has a full picture of what's going on. Red and Blue HQ also spot each other for the first time. These guys down here have been ordered to turn in place and march to the stone bridge, which is why they look like they're going backwards. This was faster than rearranging the marching order of the entire brigade. It's much better to just walk backwards, basically. Blue's 1st Brigade moves into the forest unseen by Red due to the cover of the trees. And Blue scouts confirm that no enemies are still coming on the east side of the map. At 9:50, the real battle begins in earnest. In the middle of the map, Red lines up for battle right as Blue starts debouching from the woods. Blue correctly guesses that Red will finish deploying before Blue, and wisely orders a retreat to the tree line. Meanwhile, Red is coming around the bend and spots Blue coming out of the woods, and Blue is about to cross this bridge. From here on out, the battle takes place in this smaller area. Zooming in, we get a clearer picture of the units. At 1000 hours, Red and Blue have lined up for battle, with Red demonstrating a textbook assault formation. He was able to accomplish this by giving the simple order to line up for battle. They didn't need any further direction, and he didn't need to micromanage them. I simply lined them up appropriately and with a mind to maximum effectiveness, which is what his brigade commander would be independently doing. Red's main body has been ordered to seize Hill 72. Red is thinking that he'll swing them around on top of the hill into Blue on the other side in the forest. In the south, Blue's position is threatened by Red's cavalry approaching from Hill 50 to the west, so he orders them to deploy in a line. But Red's main body puts them in danger, and they'll have to respond to that as well. Blue is in a really tricky position here, and I'm curious what people think their response would have been in the same position. Here's another angle of the situation. There's no reason for sharing this, I just thought it really looks cool. By 10:10, the first shots have been fired. Red sends out skirmishers, and they start shooting each other. The skirmishers aren't going to win this engagement, but that's not Red's goal here. He just wants to use them to pin Blue in place. Blue artillery here is super effective against Red 3rd Brigade. Even though Red's artillery was fully deployed and ready to fire, Red makes the mistake of ordering his artillery to redeploy somewhere else, when they could have helped with the attack. They end up being useless for the rest of the game, so this is objectively a mistake. On the hill, Red has no time to redeploy, and his men are lightly shaken from the effort of climbing the hill. Red decides that he'll smash into Blue's flank in full brigade mass, leaving the 2nd Brigade behind to rest and just continuing forward with the 1st Brigade even though they're tired. Blue doesn't have many assets to respond. 3 battalions are sent, but he's fighting on 2 fronts, and 3 battalions can only do so much against 3 brigades. The area by the stone bridge is a mess. Blue orders his men to redeploy because of Red's brigades climbing up the hill, but traffic jams force the cavalry to stay sitting targets for Red horse artillery that starts to open up. Again, a very smart move from Red here, and Red's cavalry detachment is able to punch well above their weight in tactical impact with these maneuvers. I'm really impressed by the Red player in this game. This is top-tier stuff. The artillery causes the horses to rout, and there's chaos and horses and men running all over each other, and the bridge is only like 12 feet wide, and only so many can cross at once, so it's just chaos, and Blue's cavalry is effectively destroyed by the artillery. As a side note, kind of showing off what I was playtesting, the markers here are for dust clouds, which is one of the other things that I was playtesting this time around. They ended up working pretty well, and I would recommend other umpires use them. The markers here are for Blue, who technically can't see the units, but would be able to mentally fill the gaps, so I included them in his screenshot and then labeled them as dust clouds, just to explain why they're in his vision cone. For reference, this is Red's POV. You can see that the markers indicate things that Red can't see, but which he can otherwise sense. So there's a sound marker to indicate loud artillery fire coming from this direction, and it's pointing at Blue's artillery at that rough location. And there's another marker for a dust cloud in the distance. Red's not worried about it too much because he can see that Blue's whole army is in front of him, and assumes that it must be some kind of small cavalry contingent. He ordered Red 3rd to prepare for a potential cavalry flank, but there's no real maneuvering that would need to be done for that in this case. Anyways, I thought I would just show off what I was playtesting. This really saved me a lot of time and confusion as an umpire, because before I would have to type out what I'm explaining, and it would be a lot slower than just placing a marker that has a pointer to literally where it is. The feedback I got from the players was that this was a lot clearer than my older systems where I would, write out the description of where the dust clouds are coming from. Anyways, moving back to the game, at 10:20, Red smashes into Blue's line in full brigade mass. The first line breaks, but there's 2 more waves right behind them, and it's virtually guaranteed to break through. It's just a question of how bad Red's losses will be and how long it takes. Here I'm pointing out the tokens for the revised damage system that I was also playtesting. As with the dust clouds, this went really well. I was kind of inspired by James's damage system and how clear it was, but I wanted the realism of the old Prussian system, so I did some very complicated math to convert the old Prussian system into a simple 10-point damage system for ease of play. I really do want to emphasize how much headache this gets rid of, and it still feels like the old Prussian system, just without these backflips that you had to do. I would highly recommend doing this if you're going to use the old Prussian system. But I'm digressing too much into nerding out about the rules, so back to the game at hand. Over here, we're starting to see that Blue's artillery on the riverside is firing at Red's flank on the hilltop. It has limited effectiveness due to the distance and angle, but over time it's going to snowball. Here we see that Red's skirmish line has failed in their attack. They're technically in a routing state under the rules, but they're allowed to go prone rather than run, so they do that to keep the Blues pinned in place. A bit to the right of this position, Blue's artillery destroyed one skirmisher unit entirely and has damaged its parent battalion severely, pinning them down in the buildings of the town. To make matters worse, Blue horse artillery has set up to try to support with flanking fire. 10 minutes later, the battery destroys the damaged unit, and then fires into Red's flank as his battalions are sent forward from behind the skirmishers, once again demonstrating how horse artillery can punch well above their weight in the right circumstances. But the main battle is in the center. Red sends the 2nd Brigade in, and this time there's no stopping them. Red takes severe damage in the assault, but if Blue didn't have a reserve, his entire brigade would have broken completely. This time, they only rout. However, this is only going to buy them about 10 minutes. Blue knows that the battle in the forest is already lost, and orders a general fighting retreat back across the bridge, sending support where he can. Red makes more mistakes with his artillery, and Blue's supporting fire is able to take full advantage of it, to wreak havoc on Red's artillery. But it's too little too late. By 10:40, Red keeps up the pressure and charges again in full brigade mass, straight into the middle of Blue's line. The French style of war proves successful, and wins Red HQ the battle because Blue's brigade commander was right behind his men in the middle, trying to keep up morale and preventing a total collapse. With the center collapsed in front of him, Red's 1st Brigade commander surrenders honorably to prevent a massacre, saving what's left of his men but turning them into POWs. First Brigade is completely gone. Although blue sets up a grand battery on the opposite hill, they can't fire into friendly positions in the woods with so many of their own troops in the way. Red is going to be able to escape with the POWs. By 10:50, here's what that looks like. Witnessing the collapse of his line, blue orders his engineers to blow the bridges, cutting Red off from their men, and cutting him off from the 1st Brigade. The rest of the battle proceeds with Red marching out of range and moving down the North Road. The game is over, and here's some more close-ups of the end. Here were the losses for both sides, showing roughly how the point system works. Red lost about 16%, while blue lost 24%. If we count the POWs as losses, then blue's losses rise to 44%. Losses were crazy high in this game, even with my modified infantry fire tables. So when I read accounts from the old Prussian officers that Kriegsspiel is too lethal compared to real life, I can kind of see where they're coming from. However, a good portion of these losses from this game were due to mistakes from the players. So I'm not sure of the degree to which the losses are too high, if that makes sense. It might not be as bad as I think, I guess. So the game is over. If you had to twist my arm, I'd probably give the victory to Red, but since both sides basically accomplished their objectives, calling it for one or the other doesn't really seem right. So I'd call it a draw. There were no spectators this game, which saved a ton of time and headaches for me. In terms of why I would call this a draw, I've put the points on screen. Red achieved their objective of breaking through, but lost way too much artillery for an effective vanguard in the future against Blue's main body. Red also took too many POWs and is going to be significantly delayed. Remember, their objective is to pursue Red's main body. Now they're going to be caught up organizing literally thousands of POWs. Also, Red's cavalry was going the wrong way at the end of the game, but that's something that can be fixed in 10 or 20 minutes. I also wanted to remind the players that due to my error as the umpire, Blue's briefing only included protection of the King's Road, and Blue only learned that he needed to protect the North Road a few turns in. So, in light of this, Blue performed above and beyond my expectations. In terms of Blue's objectives, Blue has firmly closed off the King's Road. I don't think there's any dispute with that. His final orders were to blow the Stolza Bridge, leaving only the heavily defended Stone Bridge as another crossing. Although he failed to stop Red completely from going down the North Road, he did inflict severe casualties and generally just inflicted a lot of time delay on Red. So it's kind of a wash, and it's a victory for both sides, which would be more of a draw. In terms of performance, I would say this was a brilliant performance from both players with super cool tactics and both sides demonstrating that they are incredibly competent at this game. The overall commander for Red Team, whose name on Discord is Never, is usually quite aggressive in my games, and he played aggressively in this game as well, and that went over really well for him. Aggression was absolutely necessary for Red to win, and he completely understood this, which was a massive victory in itself for Red. Blue similarly understood that the objective was to delay Red rather than win the game. Winning was delaying Red. So in the end, because Blue delayed Red, he kind of won anyways, even though he sort of lost. You kind of have to recontextualize what victory means depending on the context provided in your briefing, and Blue really picked up well on that. I also wanted to thank Blue for the amount of grace that he demonstrated when I made a serious mistake in his briefing and told him in the middle of the game, while he was technically losing, that, oh yeah, by the way, you have to defend this other objective. So thank you, Blue. This was a fun game for me to umpire. I saved a lot of time and headache doing a lot of the things that I mentioned, the dust cloud markers, which I recommend that other people do, and the new damage system that just simplifies it from 1 to 10. Of course, I had to do a lot of mathematics to sort of simplify it in that way, but once you get the end result of 1 to 10, it just simplifies things so much and makes the game run a lot faster on the umpire end. Really would strongly recommend that. So anyways, yeah, this game was a draw, which was also something interesting in and of itself. I don't think I've seen any draws in any of my games before. This is the first draw in one of my games, and from what I know, draws or stalemates in most Kriegsspiel games are like
really rare. So there were a couple of interesting things in this game that I wanted to show off. But yeah, I don't want to overstay my welcome with this video, so I'm just going to cut to black. Thanks for watching.